Hello and welcome to Parenting Stuff I Wish I Knew Sooner and Want You to Know Now. I'm your host, Erica Desper, founder of the Center for Confident Parenting and a mom who seemed to learn everything I needed to know the hard way. I'm joined today by Kristin Quinn, a mom of 3 young children and the owner of Toddlers and Tomatoes, where she helps families navigate stressful mealtimes as a behavior feeding consultant. Kristin, welcome and thank you for joining me.
Erica, I'm happy to be chatting with you today.
Likewise. So, first, tell us a little bit about how and why you came to offer families this type of support.
So it was a little bit of an evolution for me. When I found my first job, I fell into it, not really knowing much about the world of feeding. But I knew I wanted to work with children and support families. And I was very much drawn to the Children's Hospital of Philadelphia as
Mhm.
sort of the place I wanted to be. And I accepted a job there on their feeding team. And I really, really loved the work there. And in that environment, children come into their day hospital program and they go through it's called an intensive day hospital program,
Mhm.
and it is a behavior management program. And families usually ended up there because there were there were medical reasons where the lack of nutrition was impacting, their health and
Right.
well-being. And so that's how they ended up in this hospital program. Most people, aren't rushing to sign up for a 4-week, all day, every day program unless it's a really dire situation.
Right.
Um, but I learned so much there. Yeah. um, so it's, you have to be really committed to come to that program, or somebody has to have told you, you absolutely have to do this because there's no other avenue for you at this point, and you need to get your child eating, and this is where you have to be. And so we had a mixed bag of families who either were really self-motivated to be there or were there because they were told they have to be there. And working there, I realized that at the hospital, at the children's hospital, the focus is the child, um, and the task at hand, which is getting them to eat,
Sure.
and not so much the long-term carryover into the home, or even really having the time to make sure that the um, families understood why they were there and how what we were doing in the program was going to carry over to their part in carrying it
Right.
over to home and understanding what we were asking them to do. And so I always, while I was working there, I lamented that because I didn't have a lot of control over that piece of it.
Right.
Um, and, I was just a worker bee, and had to follow the structure of the program, and there wasn't a lot of openness to my input
Sure.
on how the program should evolve. But but I really enjoyed the work. I could see it was a situation where you could see the change that you've made.
Mhm.
You were impacting lives, and you could see it. Sounds cliche, but
Absolutely.
it was something like tangible. I witnessed the positive impact. Um, and of course, I love children, and I just loved it. But when we had our second baby, the daycare costs were more than my equal to my salary.
A challenge that many of our listeners will
So we
probably
had
be
to make
familiar
some
with.
choices.
Yeah.
Yeah. So and it was at a point in time where, even though I really loved the actual work, all of the stuff that comes with working in a, office environment and politics and all of that was really stressing me out. And
Mm.
so it was sort of everything kind of came together, and I needed an out. And
Mhm.
also the financial piece to it didn't really make a lot of sense for me to go to this stressful situation, leave my kid, figure out something for the kids, and barely bring any money in. So I needed
Sure.
a change. But I wanted to take I didn't want to give up that work because I just loved it so much. And I saw an opportunity to be able to kind of do what I thought to sort of fill the gaps that I saw working in this very specific
Right.
program. And even from so we decided, okay, I'm gonna stay home with the kids and try to get something going with feeding. What can I do on my own? I am not a dietitian. I'm not a psychologist. I do have my master's in counseling, and I had a lot of experience, and I worked on a multidisciplinary team, and so I had a lot of things to pull from. And I thought that really what I always thought was missing was the parent support and
Right.
education, and
And the follow
I
through to home.
wanted to fill that gap. Yeah.
Mhm.
And, when I came out of the program, I was very gung ho about the behavior management piece because I saw it work. It is effective. And, I believed in it and I still do believe in it. And I know there's some questions about that coming, but I, I still think it is a very effective way of changing behavior, behavior management protocol, for lack of a better word.
Mhm.
Um, But the point I'm trying to make is that I have evolved. So I came out very hardcore into the behavior. I can show you how to manage your child's behavior, which is still true. But really what I want to do is connect people to things that make sense to them so
Mhm.
that they feel that they can improve their situation at mealtimes, and their overall quality of life in terms of feeding their kids. So that was a very long-winded answer to your
No, it's
how I came to be
wonderful.
where
It's
I'm at.
wonderful. I think a lot of us came to do what we do by having to pivot because of our own families and by seeing a need and
Yeah.
loving the work and trying to put that into a model that feels, right to us. So I could totally relate to that.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So let's start with after that. How is it common for kids and parents to struggle with mealtime? And like, what kind of struggles are we talking about that families are facing that someone like yourself can help with?
So picky eating is very common. It's a developmental stage many kids go through. Particularly in the toddler years, I would
Mhm.
say that more families than not experience the picky eating phase. And I think a lot of people just kind of grin and bear it, and some people are overwhelmed by it.
Mhm.
And of course, it's a spectrum. Feeding is so complex, and there are so many reasons why a child might be challenged with eating. And there are so many different types of people who are parents and their tolerance level for different things and what feels stressful. So I would say that most kids who don't have other reasons, other medical reasons or developmental reasons, um, it's not uncommon for all kids to go through this phase. But there are kids where it's more pervasive, it's more long lasting, it's more stressful to the family, and it impacts their health.
Mhm.
People find me sort of usually at a point of desperation. The
Right.
pediatrician is either not concerned, but the parent is still stressed out, or they've tried a bunch of different things and nothing's working, or they didn't even know anything was available to help them, but they're Googling and they find me. Um, but there's so many different reasons that eating is challenging and why a family looks for help. And a lot of people find me thinking I'm something that I'm not, dietitian, psychologist, occupational therapist, or some other thing, because there's so
Mhm.
many people who do address feeding.
Right.
Um, but I like to think that any family that falls in my lap for feeding challenges, I can support. of course, the people, sometimes someone's looking for something specific. They want somebody to tell them, how many calories does my kid need? What foods do they need from each group? I want a detailed meal plan, and that's not I can help with that, but that's not necessarily what I do.
Right.
So I'll help connect them to somebody who can help them with their goals.
Sure. And I think what's
But
great about what you
many families
offer.
struggle with feeding. It's very common.
Yeah, and I can attest to that working with families on sleep and toileting. It's almost always tied together. And if they're struggling with one, they're probably struggling with one of the others. But what I love about what you do is you can sort of help a family pull apart, is there something medical underlying this? Is it more of a, like, should a speech language pathologist be stepping in? Should it be more for a dietitian, nutritionist? So I feel like you're a great first step or first stop, even if you aren't the last stop, because that's so hard
Yes.
for a parent or a
Yeah.
layperson to. We can all see the struggle, we can all experience the struggle, but we aren't necessarily qualified. Even if we're qualified, when it's your own kid, you're emotional and you're frustrated and all those things. So we can't necessarily say, like, here's why the struggle is happening, and therefore here's the type of person that we need to, to call in. So I think that enough is great to get help with that alone.
Yeah, and sometimes the family doesn't it's not clear what the underlying reasons are. Sometimes it
Right.
is pure picky eating. You just need a little bit of a tweak in your expectations and things. And sometimes it's more. And there are occasions where we really don't figure that out until several weeks of working together.
Mhm.
Or I'm sure that you've come across this with working with families, but sometimes there's just like a really important piece of information that isn't discussed for a while, and
Oh,
then it comes out and you realize, oh, this is what's going on. So I think I've had one client said to me that the biggest benefit of my service was providing space for them to think about this and talk about it.
yeah.
And that really as you know, just from us chatting, sometimes I struggle to really summarize how I help families, and I thought that that was really a brilliant way of summarizing
It
it.
is really great.
I provide the space to figure it out.
Yeah, I know when I'm going to meet with a family for sleep challenges and they fill out that very lengthy form for me to give me some background. Sometimes after doing that, we come together and they go, as I was filling this out for you, I thought of something that might be part of the problem. And I'm like, yeah, that's one of the reasons we do that. So definitely providing that space to
Yeah,
think. You and I know, and we can tell our listeners that, with behaviors, whatever they are, there's almost always something that comes prior to that. So it's a good time for families to think about, like, what preceded the behavior that we don't love, and
for
how
sure.
can we change that.
Yeah.
So this question is a little tongue in cheek, of course, but doing what you do, it's safe for us to assume that your kids always sit still for full length meals and eat only healthy foods, right?
Absolutely not. So my mother likes to say, "Don't you do this for a living?" Um, and my answer to that is I do, which is why I'm not super stressed out about it.
Right.
But I have myself gone through phases of how I manage my own kids eating.
Hmm.
Right now, just mostly because parenting has worn me down and my children are older, I don't stress out about it too much.
Yeah.
But I have two very picky eaters. And sometimes I will try to finesse some of my knowledge, but other times I'm like, you know what, they're healthy, they're growing. I don't have particular concerns or stress around meal times. So I know that this isn't something that I need to focus my parenting energy on. um, but I know how it looks on the outside, is particular to grandparents or family members.
Sure.
But you know my service is how as the adult can you manage how you're feeling about meal
Mm,
times. So I in the ideal world, the child will get on board and start eating more and better,
right.
and be more open. But there's personalities, there's diagnoses, there's developmental stages. and mood and, just being kids. They're not necessarily going to just fall in line. Um, and I think, that has helped me. Certainly in the early days when I had, big toddlers, I was definitely pulling from my uh, experiences at the hospital with the behavior program because, like I said, you can see quick change with consistent use of a behavior plan.
Mm-hmm.
And it's effective and it works and it worked for my little ones. And then, we just had different life uh, situations. So, at one point when my middle son was four and a half when we moved in with my two 90-year-old grandparents. And then we had the little one coming up behind him. And you could probably imagine that those meal times had a completely different dynamic. And
Yep.
I couldn't do some of the things that I know would work
Mm-hmm.
over time um, in that environment with my grandfather and my grandmother and everybody, putting their 2 cents in. So I kind of changed course. So like certainly I know things that could improve my children's eating, but it's not a battle that I'm choosing to have in my
Right.
home now.
Right. And I think that's a really
And I think that that's
important.
part that I have those discussions with clients as well.
Yeah, that's kind of what I wanted to touch on next is that it sounds like our own parental expectations surrounding what mealtime should look like, what types of foods should be consumed, what volume of foods should be consumed, which I do want to have you touch on as well,
Mhm.
or just where the
Yeah.
priorities
Yeah.
fall. What I hear you saying is the best way to reduce stress surrounding meal times. The solution may not lie in your child changing how they go about it, what they're willing to do. It may lie in saying, hey, I'm just not going to let this stress me out right now, or this isn't a battle I'm choosing to wage right now. And I also hear you saying that there's a time and place for both of those. Maybe there is a time when we're actively working on the child side of the issue, but that isn't going to be possible under certain circumstances. So that might be a time where we say calories are calories, whatever they're willing to eat. If they're growing, it's fine. I think that's really helpful
Yeah.
for parents to hear because it's hard to give ourselves
Yeah.
grace. Um, and feeding is just such,
For
there's
sure.
all this pressure about, milk in the beginning, whatever you're using, breast milk formula combination,
Mhm.
topic for another day. But it's just like all the burden falls on the parents. And then all of a sudden they're eating
Mhm.
food and we have less control, but
Yeah.
still I feel like we put the same pressure on ourselves, which
So
makes
much.
me, yeah, go ahead.
I was just gonna say so much of well, I tend to be a pretty even keel person, and I like take a moderate approach to most things, and it has served me well. And I think tempering expectations uh, is huge in your experience of really anything, but in
Yeah.
particular mealtimes or
Yeah.
anything that you're expecting from your child. If you can
Sure.
temper your expectations to what you have observed to be reasonable expectations of them, then you're going to feel less stressed. So just as as an example, if you consistently give your kid a full sandwich every day and they take 3 bites out of it and you're frustrated because most of the sandwich is left, it would probably feel a lot better to both of you if you gave them a quarter of a sandwich and they ate it all. Um,
Mhm.
so really observing your child and your own reactions to things and kind of tweaking as necessary um, will help you feel better about the situation.
That's a great example. And in case a parent is hearing that and like, "Ugh, that idea just makes me stressed. I don't think you're saying like that's the forever solution. It's like for now in this moment, what we can do to both feel better and successful and avoid waste is to do the quarter sandwich. That doesn't mean that eventually you wouldn't move on from there.
Yeah,
We tend to be very all or nothing. So
correct. That's
what you're talking about is more of like in this moment, and we can get to later. Yeah.
yeah. If you can have positive moments and successful moments, you can build on those.
I love that. So while we're on
And
the
as much
topic,
as
yeah.
I was just going to say, as much as parents are feeling stressed, even though uh, the thought is that the child is being challenging or difficult, it's really that the child is having a challenging time.
Mm.
And so if we can make the child feel better and more successful, then you can move on from there. You can build on that.
That is an excellent point. I'm a big fan of the phrase "kids do well when they can," and if they
Yeah,
can't, they're probably having a hard time, not giving you a hard time. But that can take a lot to sort of
for
step
sure.
back and reframe it like that. So that brings up a good point of maybe the quarter sandwich versus the whole sandwich. I feel like families get tripped up a lot on giving their kids a loaded plate of food and then feeling frustrated that's not all getting finished. So if we're just on the topic of
Mhm.
volume, can you speak a little bit to like, let's use a toddler as an example. Are we serving full sandwiches? I mean, is that part of the problem that we're just serving too much and too much at once?
So I would say that if I had to choose one thing that is a common, something common that I see, it's that we're putting too much in front of kids across
Hmm.
the board. Um, in terms of toddlers, a good rule of thumb is instead of looking at one meal and oh my goodness, they didn't eat anything during this one meal. You want to look at their whole day, and then instead of one day, you want to look at their whole week and sort of pull back the lens a little bit. This one meal might be feel really frustrating because there was just too much food in front of them, but so they didn't eat a lot at dinner, but you know what? They ate a lot at breakfast or lunch, or they had a lot of snacks throughout the day. Um, so I think kind of looking at the bigger picture and not just one meal can be helpful. But yes, we put way too much in front of kids. I guess it goes back to my training at CHOP, but I am a big proponent, especially with the little kids, of one bite at a time. It's more laborious for the adult, and
Mm-hmm.
you have to provide a lot more constant attention. But you're better able to have the child pace themselves and also to see, okay, when do they start slowing down? When is it too much? And it gives you a better idea. It gives you more information on what is reasonable for my child at this time. What's a reasonable amount?
Mm-hmm.
Um, and even if, say, for a toddler, you cut up a quarter of a banana and a quarter of a sandwich and, a cup of milk, and that's altogether, that's a decent meal. But if you put it all in front of them at once, they might just be like, nope, I'm not doing that. That's way too much for me.
Mm-hmm.
But if you give them a few pieces at a time, it's more manageable visually.
Right. Yeah. Thinking about it from a visual
Mhm.
perspective, I think is really helpful. So, another thing I think
Yeah.
parents sometimes need to adjust their expectations about is being seated for all meals and how long is reasonable for a child to be seated. Can you
Yeah.
speak to that a bit when you're working with families?
Yeah. So, another great point, I do think that we tend to expect kids to sit way longer than is reasonable. And again, I know that you're asking me to provide guidelines, but it's so specific to children. But for a toddler, I would
Sure.
say 5 minutes is decent. 10 minutes is pushing it. 15 minutes, that's a long time for like a 2-year-old to sit down and folk attend to something that they may not really want to be doing. Now,
Hmm.
some toddlers are going to love mealtime and want to sit there and eat for a long period of time, but other ones are not. Um, and again, I would say observe your child. Are they getting antsy at 1 minute? And then you have to build up from 1 minute. You have to bring your expectations down to 1 minute and then build up that tolerance for sitting there. But
And what might
no
that look like?
child.
Like they go away and come back and sit longer, or they go away and they're done, or does it just vary? Like, what would a parent be wanting to happen after the moment where they say, "You've sat enough, let's pause"?
So if we're working on eating a certain amount of food and you really need them to finish a certain amount of food, I would say it's acceptable to have them sit for a little bit, let them up, and bring them back. But I would probably recommend that most of the time you set a goal for being seated, and then they're done. So
Right.
if you as the parent can uh, accept that and be okay with that and know that you're going to build on it, I would just say, okay, the expectation is they're going to sit here for 3 minutes. We're going to get what we can in and we'll come back to it later, but not immediately.
Okay.
Um,
Right. So that
so
we're
again, it just
achieving,
goes back to,
oh, sorry, we're achieving both the goal of getting in the calories, but not teaching them like you could just run away and come back, run away and come back.
right. And also you don't want it to become like a game, I
Hmm.
guess is what you're saying. Like you don't want to be chasing them around for 20 minutes. But what I was going to say is even like for an older kid, I would say 20 minutes is usually you want to try to keep it under 20 minutes because little
Okay.
kids for many little kids eating is not a priority and
Hmm.
it's sort of like an interruption to their day. They have to sit, they have to attend to the food, they have to maybe eat things they're not thrilled about, and expecting them to sit there for a long period of time just makes it feel frustrating for both for the child and the adult.
Absolutely. I've always found that there's two styles of kids with sleep, and I think the same applies to eating. Um, there are kids who like live to sleep. They love their sleep. They're always on the high end of the totals. You have to wake them up or they'd go on forever. And there's the total opposite of like
Yeah.
they sleep just enough to live. They get that
Yeah.
little cat nap and they're right back in the action. So I tell my family it's the same thing about eating. Is there are kids who live to eat? My son was one of them. He always acted famished, even if he had just eaten, 45 minutes to 2 hours
Yeah.
before.
Yeah.
And then I've worked with kids who eat just enough to live. Literally, they're always low on the growth curve. They're okay, but everyone's a little nervous
Yeah.
about it. And for
Yeah.
those latter kids, I can totally see meals feeling like an interruption of far more important things. And that's something for parents to remember is you're looking at it through the lens of a 2-year-old brain. If you're with a 2-year-old, everything seems
Right.
super important.
And to
And
be fair, I know yeah. To be fair, I know some adults who don't enjoy eating the way I enjoy eating, who could care less about what they eat as long as, they're fueling their body and moving on and it's not an enjoyable experience for
yeah,
them. I mean, I personally don't understand that, but um, there's all kinds of preferences for everything. And I think
absolutely.
that's a hard thing for parents. So especially when your child is very young, it's one of your main responsibilities is to make sure that your child is nourished, has the food that they need to grow and be healthy. And it can feel really daunting when that is stressful all day, every day.
Hmm.
Um, but but there's some kids where it's not going to be an enjoyable experience for them,
Right.
and unfortunately it's just something that you're going to have to learn together to manage to get through it.
Right. Okay. Which makes me think of something I did not ask you in advance, so I apologize. I've heard of, I
It's
believe
okay.
it's called the division of responsibility or something similar. Like, what is a parent's role?
Hmm.
You mentioned this job of it's your job to make sure your child is nourished. Obviously, at some point, the burden of that process shifts a little bit over to the child. So, what, from
Yeah.
your point of view, what is a parent's job to do? And then what's the job of the child?
So I have to say that I have a love-hate relationship or an evolving relationship with the division of responsibility. I my professional experience sort of led me down the behavior path where there really is no choice. You do what is being asked of you, and then the if you do X, this happens. You do Y, this happens, and that really resonated with me, and I saw it be effective. Um, I didn't have a lot of opportunity to see the long term effects of that, or like how that played out at home, and were people able to build on that. And the division of responsibility when I first learned about it seemed like a challenging way to a challenging way to get your child to eat more. Um, I've come to really appreciate the theory. And so something that happens in the feeding world is that people sort of double down on their theories and their approaches and kind of are inflexible in creating a multifaceted approach tailored to each family. Now, many
Mhm.
of the when I say the feeding professionals, many of these people are working in specific departments where you have a theoretical approach, and that's your avenue. And but there is a lot of what's the word I'm looking for? Discord? No, what's the
We'll
word?
go with that.
Yeah, like
Disagreement.
our way is the way, and the other ways are not good. They don't work. They don't work, or they impart some sort of harm. And I think that really, in actuality, for many kids, it takes a combination of approaches. So, to
Absolutely.
answer your question, the division of responsibility is the adult controls what they have control over, and the child controls what they have control over. And so the adult controls what food is available in the home, when food is offered, where it is offered, and the child decides whether or not they're going to eat it. And it
Mm,
that can be effective if there are no immediate health concerns or you're
sure.
not needing a real quick change,
Mhm.
because that puts a lot of control in into the child's hands, which is totally fine if all of the adults are on board with a really uh, slow, not guaranteed process of change.
Mhm.
It takes a lot of stress out, and it makes for a lot of more peaceful meal times.
Mhm.
And it allows a lot more opportunity for children to uh, be in control of what they're eating and how much they're eating. Um, but in some situations that either doesn't resonate with a parenting style or it doesn't result in a quick enough change for the stress to be relieved of the
Right.
adult, um, or and sometimes there's a health concern
Right.
and we need to figure out something that is going to get the food in at a quicker pace.
Mhm.
um,
Okay,
so
great. I
yeah,
know that word's tossed around a lot, or that phrase, so I
yeah,
wanted to make sure we
yeah,
touched on
yeah.
it. Um, and you did mention the timing of meals. I would love to touch on that for a second while we're still on expectations. So, obviously, we do similar things. I help families solve sleep problems. And one of the really common challenges that sort of overlaps with eating is that maybe we have a daycare scenario or some other caregiving scenario. They're giving a snack towards the end of the day. Parents are picking their kids up and heading home, and
Yeah.
maybe they're giving a snack as well. I had a family this week, and the kiddo basically snacks from 3 to 6 because they're asking to,
Mhm.
and then at 6 they sit down to dinner,
Yeah.
and they get nothing out of that kid. And then at bedtime they say they're hungry, and then that delays bedtime, and I could
Okay.
just sort of see the domino effect. So, how much does snacking play into the struggles that kids are having surrounding the actual meals we're sitting down for together?
So, obviously, if your kid is eating, snacks all day, they are not and maybe it's not obvious because, as parents, we're just trying to get through the day, and we're
Mhm.
trying to limit uh, our own sensory input of kids asking for food and, needing
Mhm.
attention, and we're just handing out snacks because that's what makes the day go on. Um, and so there's no I am okay with snacking all day, but it goes back to altering your expectations of what you're expecting from
Right.
them at meal times. And certainly if you have a situation where it's creating another problem, like they're not eating when you want them to eat a full meal, and then they're hungry, saying they're hungry at bedtime, and then it kind of pulls on your parent guilt because you don't want to send your kid to
Mhm.
bed hungry, but you've given them the opportunity to eat, they just didn't take it.
Right.
Um, so my recommendation is to create as predictable as possible of a routine of when food is available.
Mhm.
now, of course, like I said, I totally understand life is life, and sometimes you don't follow the routine or the schedule and you change course as necessary. But kids really respond. I'm a very visual person, so I really like suggesting visual schedules, especially for younger kids. This is the time that breakfast, lunch, and dinner, around the time that breakfast, lunch, and dinner happen. This is when you can have a snack, and there's no snacks or anything after, after dinner or whatever it is that you decide that is reasonable. Um, but it goes so if your kid is snacking all day, you need to change what you expect from them at meal times. But if you want to just if you are okay with your kid grazing all day, that's fine, but you can't think that they're going to sit down for a full meal.
Right. And that sort of speaks to what you were saying before, is that it can't be a one size fits all solution. Fortunately, I know enough from my relationship with you that I was able to offer this family those same two options. Either
Yeah.
curtail the snacks, keep your dinner expectations, or keep the snacks and just change dinner expectations. I also suggested try
Mhm.
to keep snack foods on, not just all goldfish, right? Like if we're expecting that this is kind of going to take up a portion
Mhm.
of dinner and we're okay with that, just be
Yeah.
mindful of what types of foods are being offered for snack. Is that may go back to making it stressful, but what do
For
you think
sure.
about that?
For sure, that's definitely something I recommend to try to optimize the nutritional content of what you're offering as snacks. And that does get harder the more they're aware of more treat kind of snacks. So
Mm-hmm.
if you can, in it, in the early years, and I am not saying that I did this as a mom, but in the early years, if you can only offer the healthiest options and not have a bunch of junk food in your house available, that will help in what they choose to snack on.
Mm-hmm.
But of course, once you send them out into the world, they're going to get wind of all of the good things that they might want. And so it gets hard. It gets harder to control uh, your kid's environment.
Sure.
But in your house, you have the most control. Where you're going to have the most control is what's in your house.
Right.
So if you can start them off on snacks that have some nutritional value, or even things that they eat during a mealtime that you could offer in a snack portion,
Right.
um, that is good.
Yeah, great. Okay.
Mm,
What about the
yeah.
timing of meals? So, another challenge my families encounter a lot is that by the time they're able to get dinner on the table, get home from work and school and etc., their child is almost too hungry to eat or too tired to eat. So maybe they did not have a bunch of snacks, but they just kind of missed the
Yeah.
window. Do you find that to be true? And like if parents need to eat later than kids at a certain stage of life, like what solutions might you offer? How early might kids need to eat? And then how do we
So,
achieve family dinner if we need different dinner times?
yeah. So a lot of times in those situations, say, a child gets home from school at 3 and they're really hungry for dinner at 4, between 4 and 5, which I find is pretty common. Young kids are hungrier earlier than the adults are ready or able to sit down and have dinner.
I
Um,
see that a lot.
I would say that to whatever extent is possible, feed them early or provide a nutritious snack, or you know um, if you're able to sit them down and have their first dinner, I like to call it, then that sort of holds them over, and gives you a little bit more leeway for family dinner time. And I like to, in those situations where you have to feed the child, or it's helpful to feed the child earlier, I like to really use family dinner time as socialization and
Mhm.
positivity and kind of catching up. And anything that they eat during that time, I consider bonus.
Right.
Um,
So it's
so
really just flip
if you're able
flopping
to,
dinner with snack.
yeah, and
Mhm.
and that doesn't always work out. So I'm sure you've experienced this, but from the hours of 3 p.m. to bedtime is crazy, I think, in every house with
Mhm.
kids. It's just like that time of day where everything has to happen. Um, and I you have to give yourself grace, and you can have the best laid plans, and sometimes it doesn't work out. But when you have a routine, an intended routine, it's something to fall back on. So you get back, if you get off of track 1 or 2 nights, you can fall back on the more ideal routine, feed the kid early, have family time. Um, but you know, life happens, and you have to be able to, part of what I do is kind of help people see that it's okay. Like not every day is going to go
Right.
the best, and you can regroup and try again.
Right. Right. Excellent. Okay. And I can remember a time, I'm not sure how old my son was, but I remember, and I thought I was doing something like brilliant and revolutionary, where I was like, you know what? You're so hungry after school and you're so not interested when we sit down. We're just going to flip it for now. And it did.
Yeah.
It really took like multiple
Yeah.
stressors off of my plate, because then he wasn't a disaster after school. He wasn't over snacking and driving me crazy. He was really hungry and he really ate. He did not eat lunch at school because it was too stressful of an environment.
Mm,
So this is why he was so hungry when he
yeah.
came home. And I was so
Yeah. And
concerned about him not eating.
I think the school lunch is something, a lot of people, especially, families new to the school environment, don't realize how overwhelming school lunch can be.
And
And they,
fast.
many people may not, hmm very fast and very overwhelming. And sometimes depending on their age, the only time they really get to socialize during the day. Um, so I think, for some families, that's sometimes a piece of information that comes out through discussion, and they're not realizing like, oh, they're not really eating at lunchtime, or they don't have, or the reason they're not eating is because it's so overstimulating. And sometimes there's things you can do to help that, sometimes not, and you can, sort of make up for it later in the day. The other thing I was going to say is sometimes having the double dinner, like the early dinner and then the family dinner, is an added stressor.
Sure.
Um, so I recommend trying to think of some like ready made or quick and easy grab and go kind of things that you can offer at that early meal.
Mhm.
Or things that you can sort of proportion out earlier in the week and just have ready to go. Because I know that for some families, just thinking of dinner time is stressful enough, and then adding two kind of just uh,
Right.
makes the stress even more.
I think the good news for families is there are options and there are outside of the box things you can try. The not as great news is
Mhm.
you may have to experiment a little to find out what's feasible for your family dynamic and your schedule and all of that. But more options are better than less. um, I don't have
Yes,
too
for
many
sure.
more questions for you, but I did want to come back to the topic of picky eating, because that is probably the most common thing that parents are stressed out about, and there's a lot of conflicting advice about how to approach that. Are we enforcing, you have to do one taste, or you can do a no thank you bite, or we're just putting new foods on the plate but we're not, forcing it somehow? Or are we like,
Yeah.
give it a kiss, sniff it, talk about how it smells, don't force the issue of like actually consuming it?
Yeah.
What are you currently
Yeah.
seeing work the best for the most kids in terms of a non-stressful exposure to non-preferred foods?
The thing that the what I find is the most applicable to any family is figuring out what works for you and being really consistent and predictable with your expectations. So if you are doing the division of responsibility and your intent is to provide the food at predictable intervals, and whether or not your child eats is up to them, that's great. Be really consistent with that, and don't all of a sudden one day demand that they try something if that's not really what your overall approach is.
Mhm.
And conversely, if every day at every dinner time, the expectation is that everyone's going to have a taste of something new, um, if you want that to be an effective way to expose your children to new tastes, then you have to be really consistent in that expectation and not only throw it in there every once in a while. Um, So if I could just talk about the one bite thing for a second,
Sure.
that's another controversy in the feeding world. Uh, my thoughts is that one bite is a reasonable amount, a reasonable uh, ask of
Hmm.
a child if um, you are observing their cues. So if you've got a kid that gags and throws up and carries on at the thought of something new, you're not going to give them a scoop of broccoli, but you might give them a piece of a stalk of broccoli, and follow through with the expectation that they're going to taste it, because as the adult, you know that even though it might not be something that they're really excited to do and it might be upsetting for them, it's something that you know they're capable of doing.
Hmm.
And that's really the key. Like, are you being responsive to your child, what you're observing that your child can handle? It's not
Hmm.
reasonable to say, eat this bowl of broccoli, but it's probably a way more reasonable to say, taste this little piece of one piece of broccoli. Um, and the reason that I kind of, and I don't recommend it to every family, because some families don't have it's not, uh, it doesn't resonate with them to work through this resistant behavior to trying new things. Some kids simply will not try something new unless there's an external motivation to do so.
Hmm.
And so if for those kiddos, removing the ability to completely escape that expectation is necessary to get them
Hmm.
to try new things. Like, that's the only way that you're going to get anything past their lips. You can give them all the freedom in the world, and they're simply not going to do it if it's a little bit uncomfortable for them.
Right.
So some kids do need that extra demand placed on them, and the key is being reasonable in what you're asking for them to
Okay.
do. You know,
That's fair.
observing them and cutting back, changing the expectation so that it's reasonable for them.
Hmm.
But across the board, be consistent in your expectations, be predictable in your expectations, observe your child, and make adjustments based on what you're observing,
Hmm.
so that you can help them feel as successful as possible, and for them to feel better at mealtimes. Because if they're feeling better at mealtimes, they're going to be more cooperative, and you're going to feel better.
Right. I love that. That's the overarching theme here. One more controversial thing I would love you
Yeah.
to weigh in on. Are we bribing with treats after we do the non-preferred foods? Are we withholding dessert if we don't like how dinner went? Are we not stressing about that and letting it happen regardless? Or is it again like it just depends?
So I know that's my answer for everything. It
Me
depends.
too.
It depends on the kid and the family and the parenting style and tolerance for different things. I personally, so okay, I think about this a lot because, as I said, there are a lot of conflicting viewpoints on this. So I um, try to think about my reasoning and how I resonate with certain uh, things. So I first of all, I think that it is okay and not traumatizing to educate our kids on the fact that there are some foods that provide a lot of nutrition, and there are some foods that taste really good and we like to eat sometimes. I don't like making a big deal about any of it. Food is food. And I don't think that one food should be hailed as like this coveted thing that you need or want. But on the other hand, everyone, adults included, adults and children, are motivated by external factors to do things that you don't want to do.
Like a
And
paycheck.
everyone looks to be rewarded, a paycheck, avoiding a speeding ticket.
Mhm.
I was trying to think of other things that we just do because we either want or don't want the consequence.
Right.
Or I have to do this really uncomfortable thing that I don't want to do, and I'm going to give myself a treat afterwards because I want that, and that will be pleasing to me, and it will be a little bit of a consolation for doing this thing I don't want to do. So I'm not opposed to, I guess bribery or, reward. I'm not opposed to rewarding
Mm-hmm.
hard things. Um, However, when I work with a family on doing like a last bite, usually, unless it's a very challenging situation, usually the reward is being done. So it's a last bite. They know they don't have to do any more. They're not going to have to eat anything else. They're not going to have to eat any more of the offending food. And they're going to be done. And that's the reward. But I'm okay with, hey, uh, after this meal, I know you really want a Hershey Kiss. And if you try this new thing, you can have this Hershey Kiss. But I'm not saying withhold all sweets forevermore unless they um, do what you want them to do.
Right.
But I think it's okay to reward hard things.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So it
And it
sounds like
doesn't
we're back
necessarily
to
have to be
just
dessert. It can be
balance,
activity.
moderation. Yeah. Yeah. I love that. And is
Yes.
it true that we
Yeah.
generally want to introduce this very reasonable amount of a new or non-preferred food alongside something we know they like and we know they will eat so that kind of everyone's happy? Like we're not giving them a plate of all new
I
foods and
always
nothing that they like.
Correct. I always encourage and recommend having at least one thing that that they've eaten in the past. There's no
Mhm.
guarantee that they're going to eat it at any particular meal,
Right.
but
Every
one
day
thing
is a
that
new day.
they're comfortable eating. Yeah. And there's also a theory of that if you say, they like peanut butter and they're going to eat their peanut butter sandwich, and they have eaten apples in the past, but they don't really love them. And carrot is a new food. So if you present the peanut butter and the apple and the carrot, there is a theory that they're more likely to go to the apple,
Interesting.
and so like having the carrot, a totally new food, could encourage eating a somewhat new food.
Interesting. That's
If
pretty
that makes
fascinating, and
sense.
I can see how that would work for sure.
Yeah.
I know the answer to this is it
Yeah.
depends, but beyond that, what is for a parent who just is brand new to all of this? What range of times might one of these more challenging kiddos need to see a new food before we really see the acceptance and calmness over the new food we want to see? It's not once or twice, right?
No, it's definitely not once or twice. So I think that they say 10 to 15 times, but I
Mm-hmm.
would say that if your child is kind of against eating that food, then you can introduce it to them for weeks and they may not eat it.
Okay.
Um,
And then
I
that is
also,
still
anything that you can do to expose them.
right. Mm-hmm. Go ahead.
Good. Anything that you can do to expose them to different foods is awesome, but there's never a guarantee. So,
Mm-hmm.
like bringing them to the grocery store, having them help you make the
Mm-hmm.
meal plan, having them help you in the kitchen, that's all awesome and it certainly can't hurt, but uh, there's no miracles and it doesn't
Right.
necessarily always translate to them eating those
Right.
things.
And if it's going to translate, it could take weeks, and that would be in the range of what you have seen. So don't give up too
Correct.
soon, right?
More than
Okay,
10 to
great.
15 times. Yeah. Yeah.
Yes, yes. I think it helps to put numbers on things so that parents know, like, oh, well, if it took, 13, that was completely, completely okay. So if a parent is listening to
Yeah.
this and they recognize all these struggles from their daily life, but they're thinking, so how do if all kids go through this phase, right? How do I know? Are we in a phase and I should just chill out and ride this wave? Or are we in a place where I should reach out to some type of professional for support? How would you answer that parent?
So, so I always say, number one, if you're worried, talk to your pediatrician. If
Mhm.
there's really a health concern, your pediatrician will get on board with you. If your pediatrician is not concerned, that's good. That's good news. There's no immediate um, health uh, impact on their limited diet. And so that is helpful information if your pediatrician, even though you're going to your pediatrician, you're asking for help, they're saying it's fine, it's not a big deal, you're still stressed out. But if they're not worried about any health impact, that's good news.
Right.
But what I say is if you're feeling stressed and you are looking for help, then you need help.
Yep.
If if no, if people are blowing you off, but you still feel like something is not quite right, then you need some support.
Mhm.
If you're noticing things that other people aren't, someone can help you connect to the resource that you need. And it might not be the pediatrician. The pediatrician is
Right.
not concerned. That's great. Kind of reach out to another anyone who manages feeding. If they're not the right person, they should be able to connect you to somebody who can help. But
Absolutely.
so I would say if you're noticing a health impact or low energy or moodiness, that's a big a red flag. If you're noticing your child having trouble managing the food in their mouth, and you might not notice that right away, but if you start observing and you're noticing that, that's a red flag.
Okay.
If they're dropping, if there's been an incident like a choking incident or an illness, that might be sort of an acute situation that but you might need a little bit of help getting them back on track. Um, but in general, if you're looking for help, then it's
Okay.
warranted and valid.
Wonderful. This was all super helpful. And I know you answered most of that with your consultant hat on. But at the core of this, you are a mom of three
Yeah,
children. So take off your consultant hat, put only your mom hat back
it's true.
on. What is one thing that you have learned on your own journey of parenting that you wish you had known sooner and you would want our listeners to know now that maybe we have not already said, or something you want to emphasize that we have already said?
Okay. Well, I was thinking about this and trying to pick one thing, but my number one thing is do not ask a question on a Facebook group because you will get a million different answers and you will read the post and be more stressed than when you started. And you won't know which way to go.
So true.
Everyone thinks that they have all of the answers. Everyone thinks their answer is the only answer. So my suggestion or what I've learned is to find out one or two people who you resonate with their personality, their approach to life, their overall approach to parenting, and you can bounce ideas off of them and ask them questions and take what you need. You can search for answers, but you really have to kind of think about what makes sense to you and be okay with what you decide because everyone has an opinion. Everyone's going to do it differently, and it can be really stressful weeding through all of the information. And you have to just kind of trust yourself.
Mhm.
uh, and the other thing I learned is if you love your kids and they consider you a safe harbor, they're going to be fine.
Mm, I love
And
that.
I think that's, it's just an important thing to keep in mind. And they're all
Yes.
going to be fine.
Yes, right. Exactly. I love that so
If
much.
they know,
Kristen,
yeah, if
thank
they
you so
know,
much. Yeah, go ahead.
you're welcome. No, I was just going to say, if they know that you're a safe place for them, they're going to be fine and you're going to be fine. And it's all good.
Awesome. So again, we're pulling back the lens, looking at the big picture. Thank you so much
Yeah.
for joining me. I'm sure I'll have you back again to talk about this some
Thank
more. It's
you.
definitely a hot topic. Listeners, I'll be back soon with more stuff that I wish I knew
Yeah.
sooner. In the meantime, I will leave you with my list of stuff I learned the hardest way, which is always number one, accept help when it is offered. Two, ask for it when it isn't. Three, you are the expert on your child. Trust your gut. And finally, four, be the squeaky wheel. Thanks, everybody.